The crimson sunset of Kepler-4 painted the archaeological site in shades of blood and gold, casting long shadows across the newly excavated ruins. Celestini Voss brushed the alien dust from her hands as she stood before the towering obsidian structure that had consumed her thoughts for 3 months. The discovery should have been the pinnacle of her career, but all she could think about was the message waiting in her personal communicator. "Your mother doesn't have long. Please come home." The words from her brother Dryas haunted her as she packed her equipment with trembling fingers. Helena Voss had been fighting the neurodegenerative disease for 2 years, but Celestini had convinced herself there was more time. There was always supposed to be more time. Another late night. Celestini? She turned to find Marcus Webb, her research partner, approaching with 2 steaming cups of synthetic coffee. His weathered face showed concern as he handed her a cup. "I have to leave for Earth," she said quietly, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "My mother." Marcus nodded, understanding passing between them without need for words. He'd lost his own parents to the same disease that plagued the outer colonies, a mysterious condition that seemed to target families with specific genetic markers. "The ruins will wait," he said gently. "Family won't." Celestini looked back at the obsidian structure, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. Her instruments had detected unusual energy readings from within, but they'd barely begun to understand what they'd found. "There's something different about this place, Marcus. The stone. It's not like anything in our geological databases. And these symbols," she traced a finger along one of the carved patterns, "they're almost familiar. Like I've seen them before in dreams." Marcus frowned. "Dreams, it sounds insane, I know. But ever since we uncovered the main structure, I've been having the strangest visions. Beings of light, cities floating among the stars, and always this sense of longing, like I'm remembering something that never happened to me." The communicator in her pocket chimed again. Another message from Dryas. This one more urgent than the last. Celestini closed her eyes, feeling the weight of duty and curiosity warring within her. "Go," Marcus said firmly. "I'll maintain the site security and keep the corporate surveyors away. But Celestini, when you come back, we need to talk about those dreams. I've been having them too." The journey to Earth took 3 days through hyperspace, 3 days of fitful sleep filled with visions of luminous beings and impossible technologies. Celestini tried to focus on her research notes, but her mind kept returning to her mother's last video message. Helena's once bright eyes now clouded with pain and medication. Earth's medical facilities were among the best in the galaxy, but even they couldn't halt the progression of what the doctors called genetic cascade failure. Celestini had always assumed it was just an unfortunate quirk of evolution, but now she wondered if there was more to their family's medical history than she'd been told. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and artificial flowers. Helena Voss lay propped against pillows, her silver hair thin and brittle, but her eyes still held the spark of intelligence that had made her one of the galaxy's most respected xenobiologists. "Celestini," her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "You came." "Of course I came, Mom." Celestini took her mother's hand, shocked by how frail it felt. "I'm sorry I wasn't here sooner." Helena's grip tightened with surprising strength. "There's something I need to tell you. About our family. About why you're drawn to those ruins." Dryas entered the room, his engineer's uniform wrinkled from days of worry. At 28, he was 2 years younger than Celestini, with the same dark hair and green eyes that ran in their family. But where Celestini had inherited their mother's curiosity about the past, Dryas had always been focused on building the future. "The doctors said you might not have much time," he said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "What did you want to tell us?" Helena looked between her children, seeming to weigh her words carefully. "Your great-grandmother, Evelyn, wasn't entirely human." The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. Celestini felt her world tilt slightly, as if the fundamental truths she'd built her life on were suddenly uncertain. "What do you mean, not entirely human?" Dryas asked, his engineering mind demanding specifics. "She was found as a child in the ruins of an ancient city on Proxima Centauri. The colonists who discovered her said she glowed with an inner light, that she could understand languages she'd never heard, As she grew older, the light faded, but she never lost her ability to connect with alien technologies. Celestine's heart raced. The ruins on Kepler-4 are they connected to her somehow? Helena nodded weakly. The neural cascade failure isn't a disease, sweetheart. It's what happens when our hybrid genetics try to activate abilities we're not fully equipped to handle. Your connection to those ruins, it's awakening something. In your DNA, that's impossible, Dryas protested. Interspecies reproduction doesn't work that way. The genetic incompatibilities would be insurmountable for most species, Helena interrupted. But not for the ethereals. They were beings of pure consciousness who could temporarily take physical form. The legends say they fell in love with early human explorers and found ways to merge their essence with human genetics. Celestine felt a chill run down her spine. The ethereals. I've been dreaming about them. Beings of light, cities in the sky, genetic memory, Helena whispered. The closer you get to their technology, the stronger the connection becomes. But Celestine, you have to be careful. The reason the ethereals vanished wasn't natural evolution. They were hunted, destroyed by those who feared their power. A new voice interrupted from the doorway. How touching. A family reunion based on fairy tales. They turned to see a woman in an expensive business suit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was followed by two security guards who positioned themselves at the door. Victoria Blackthorne, the woman introduced herself, extending a hand that none of them shook. I represent the Nexus Corporation. We have a significant interest in the ruins your daughter has been excavating. Get out, Dryas said, standing. This is a private medical facility. Victoria smiled coldly. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, we've been monitoring unusual energy signatures across multiple star systems. Signatures that match the readings from your archaeological site. Miss Voss, more importantly, we've detected similar energy patterns in your family's medical records. Celestine felt her blood turn to ice. You've been spying on us. Corporate intelligence is hardly spying. We prefer to think of it as proactive research. Your mother's condition, your recent dreams, your unusual affinity for alien technology, it all points to a genetic inheritance that could be worth trillions to the right organization. Helena struggled to sit up straighter. The ethereals. Technology can't be weaponized. It responds only to consciousness, to emotional connection. It's not something that can be mass-produced or sold. We'll see about that, Victoria replied. Our research suggests that with the right genetic samples and some creative bioengineering, we can synthesize the necessary traits. Of course, we'd prefer voluntary cooperation from naturally occurring hybrids. And if we refuse? Celestine asked. Though she already knew the answer, Victoria's smile widened. Then we'll have to be more persuasive. The galaxy is full of dangerous places. Miss Voss, accidents happen, especially to archaeologists working alone on remote worlds. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Celestine felt rage building in her chest, and for a moment, the room seemed to flicker with an otherworldly light. The medical monitors began beeping frantically as Helena's vital signs spiked. You're killing her, Dryas said, moving toward the bed. The stress is merely accelerating the inevitable, Victoria interrupted. But perhaps we can reach an arrangement. Miss Voss returns to her excavation site, shares her findings with our research team, and submits to some harmless genetic testing. In exchange, we provide the best medical care available. For her mother, Helena's grip on Celestine's hand tightened. Don't trust her, she whispered. The ethereals, they're not all gone. Find the one who waits. Find Zephyr. Mother, well, what are you talking about? But Helena's eyes were already closing, her breathing becoming shallow and irregular. The monitors began alarming as her vital signs flatlined, and medical staff rushed into the room. In the chaos that followed, Victoria leaned close to Celestine's ear. You have 72 hours to decide. Return to Kepler-4 to be with our team, or discover just how far Nexus Corporation's reach extends. As the medical team worked frantically to save Helena Voss, Celestine stared at the woman who had just threatened her family with casual cruelty. But beneath her fear and anger, she felt something else stirring a strange resonance, as if her mother's final words had activated something deep within her genetic code. Find the one who waits. Find Zephyr. The name echoed in her mind like a half-remembered song. And suddenly she knew with absolute certainty that her mother's death was not the end of this story. It was only the beginning. Helena Voss died at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, surrounded by the antiseptic hum of medical equipment and the weight of family seeker. Celestine's return to Kepler-44 to be felt like stepping into a waking dream. The obsidian ruins stood unchanged beneath the binary suns, but everything else felt different. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation, and the strange symbols carved into the alien stone pulsed with a faint luminescence that her instruments couldn't explain. Marcus met her at the landing pad, his face grim with concern. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said, embracing her briefly. "But Celestine, some things happened while you were gone. The ruins, they've changed." "Changed how?" she asked, shouldering her equipment pack. "See for yourself." As they approached the main excavation site, Celestine gasped. The obsidian structure now glowed with a soft, ethereal light that seemed to emanate from within the stone itself. The symbols she'd studied for months were now clearly visible, forming intricate patterns that flowed across the surface like living text. "When did this start?" she whispered, mesmerized by the display. 3 days ago. Right around the time you said your mother," Marcus trailed off. But the implication hung heavy between them. "There's more. We've detected a massive chamber beneath the main structure. The scans show it's filled with some kind of crystalline formation." Celestine approached the glowing wall, drawn by an irresistible compulsion. As her fingers neared the surface, the light intensified, and she felt a tingling sensation that seemed to resonate in her very bones. "Don't touch it," Marcus warned. "The last time I tried, I got thrown back 20 feet. It only responds to you, to me specifically. Watch." Marcus approached the wall with his hand extended. The glow immediately dimmed, and the symbols faded to barely visible etchings. When he stepped back, the light returned. Celestine stared at the phenomenon, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Find the one who waits. Find Zephyr." Taking a deep breath, she pressed her palm against the warm stone. The world exploded into light and sensation. Visions flooded her consciousness, memories that weren't her own, emotions that belonged to another. She saw vast cities suspended in space, beings of impossible beauty whose very presence seemed to illuminate reality itself. And through it all, a single voice called to her across the centuries. Finally, I had begun to lose hope. The voice was masculine, melodious, and filled with a longing so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Celestine found herself standing not in the excavation site, but in a vast chamber carved from living crystal. At its center, suspended in a pillar of pure light, was the most beautiful being she had ever seen. He was tall and slender, with features that seemed carved from starlight itself. His skin held a subtle luminescence that shifted like aurora borealis, and his eyes were the deep violet of nebulae, ancient and infinitely sad. When he saw her, those eyes widened with wonder and disbelief. "You're real," he whispered, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in her soul. "I thought perhaps I had dreamed you into existence." "Who are you?" Celestine asked, though part of her already knew. "I am Zephyr Lumineth, last of the ethereals, guardian of the seventh sanctum." He paused, pain flickering across his perfect features. "And I have been imprisoned here for 3,000 years, waiting for one who carries the bloodline to set me free." "Imprisoned? By whom?" Zephyr's expression darkened. "By my own people, for the crime of loving a human woman named Evelyn." Celestine's breath caught. "Evelyn, that was my great-grandmother's name. Yes." His smile was heartbreaking in its beauty. "I loved her, and she loved me. We knew our union was forbidden. The ethereal council had decreed that our two species must never intermingle, but love recognizes no such boundaries." As he spoke, images flowed between them, memories of a love affair that transcended species, of secret meetings in hidden chambers, of a passion so pure it seemed to bend reality around them. Celestine saw Evelyn as she truly was, a young human explorer whose curiosity and compassion had captured the heart of an immortal being. "What happened to her?" Celestini asked, though she dreaded the answer. When our relationship was discovered, the council gave me a choice: abandon Evelyn and accept exile, or face eternal imprisonment. I chose love. Zephyr's form flickered with emotional distress, but they were crueler than I expected. They didn't simply imprison me, they erased all memory of our love from Evelyn's mind and cast her into space, believing she would die. But she didn't die, no. The genetic changes our union had wrought in her DNA allowed her to survive, to adapt. She was found by human colonists who believed her to be one of their own. She lived a full life, never knowing what she had lost. Zephyr's voice broke with ancient grief. I have watched through the cosmic threads that bind consciousness, seen her descendants spread across the galaxy, each generation carrying a little more of the ethereal essence. Celestini felt tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the tragedy of their story. And now I'm here. Now you're here, he confirmed, hope warming his voice. You carry enough ethereal DNA to hear me, to see me, to potentially free me. But Celestini, he spoke her name like a prayer, I must warn you. The process of freeing me will awaken every ethereal gene in your body. You will become something new, something between human and ethereal. There will be no going back. What would I become? Beautiful, he whispered, and the word carried such longing that Celestini felt her heart skip. Powerful beyond imagining, but also marked for death by those who destroyed my people. The Nexus Corporation. Zephyr's eyes blazed with sudden fury. They are the latest incarnation of an ancient enemy. Humans who discovered fragments of ethereal technology and became obsessed with claiming our power for themselves. They were responsible for the great purge that destroyed my civilization. The chamber around them began to flicker, reality asserting itself. I'm being pulled back, Celestini said desperately. Wait. Zephyr reached toward her, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. There is something else you must know. The bond between us, it's not just because of your bloodline. Souls recognize each other across time and space. What I felt for Evelyn, what she felt for me, it lives on in you. I don't understand. Love is the strongest force in the universe. Celestini, it shapes reality, bends the laws of physics, creates possibilities where none existed before. Our love created you, generations before you were born. The vision shattered like glass, and Celestini found herself back at the excavation site, Marcus shaking her shoulders frantically. You've been standing there for an hour, he said urgently. The corporate transport just landed. Nexus Corporation is here. Celestini looked toward the landing pad and saw Victoria Blackthorne striding toward them, with a team of armed security guards and scientific personnel. But her attention was immediately drawn to the figure walking beside Victoria, a tall man, whose presence seemed to drain color from the world around him. That's Thanatos Void, Marcus whispered, fear evident in his voice. Nexus Corporation's head of acquisitions. They say he's killed more archaeologists than plague. But Celestini barely heard him. Her entire being was focused on the warm presence. She could feel pulsing from within the ruined Zephyr, waiting for her decision. She could walk away, return to her old life as a simple archaeologist, and let Nexus Corporation claim whatever they could understand of ethereal technology, or she could step into the unknown, embrace her true heritage, and risk everything for a love that had transcended death itself. Victoria's voice carried across the excavation site. Miss Voss, how convenient. We were hoping to discuss your cooperation with our research project. Celestini looked at the glowing ruins, then at the approaching corporate army, then back at Marcus, whose worried expression told her he would support whatever decision she made. Marcus, she said quietly, when I touch that wall again, everything is going to change. Are you prepared for that, are you? Celestini thought of her mother's final words, of Zephyr's ancient loneliness, of a love so powerful it had echoed across centuries to bring her to this moment. She thought of Victoria Blackthorne's cold threats and the corporation that had apparently been hunting ethereals for millennia. I've been preparing for this my whole life, she realized. I just didn't know it. Without another word, she strode toward the glowing wall, Victoria's shouts of alarm fading behind her. As her palm made contact with the warm stone, the world erupted in brilliant light. This time, when Zephyr appeared before her, he was no longer behind the prison of crystalline energy. He stood free in the chamber, his hand extended toward her. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the urgency of their situation. "Once we join, once I am free, there will be those who will stop at nothing to destroy us both." Celestini didn't hesitate. She took his hand. The moment their fingers touched, power beyond imagination coursed through her body. She felt her DNA rewriting itself, felt dormant abilities awakening, felt her consciousness expanding to encompass realities she had never dreamed possible. And through it all, she felt Zephyr's love wrapping around her like starlight made tangible. When the transformation completed, Celestini opened her eyes to find herself changed. Her skin held the same subtle luminescence as Zephyr's, and when she looked at her hands, she could see energy flowing beneath the surface like liquid light. "Welcome to your true self," Zephyr said, and Victoria Blackthorne stood in the smoking ruins of what had once been the galaxy's most significant archaeological discovery. Her perfectly manicured fingers clenched into fists. The obsidian structure lay shattered around her, reduced to ordinary stone the moment Celestini Voss had vanished with her impossible lover. 3 billion credits of excavation equipment destroyed, a research team in shambles, and her prize specimens gone without a trace. "Explain to me again, how do people simply disappeared into thin air?" she said, her voice carrying the deadly calm that made Nexus Corporation executives break into cold sweats. Thanatos Void stood beside her, his pale eyes surveying the destruction with professional detachment. Where Victoria was fury barely contained, Thanatos was ice given human form. His surgical scars caught the light of Kepler-44 to B's twin suns, souvenirs from a dozen corporate wars fought in the shadows between star systems. "Energy signature suggests quantum dissolution," he reported in his mechanical voice. "Subject appears to have achieved matter-to-energy conversion without technological assistance." "That's impossible," Dr. Elena Thorne interjected, looking up from her scanner readings. The xenobiologist had been recruited specifically for this project, her expertise in alien genetics making her invaluable to Nexus Corporation's acquisition efforts. "No biological organism can manipulate quantum fields at that level." Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. "No purely biological organism, perhaps, but we're not dealing with humans anymore. Are we, Doctor?" The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If Celestini Voss had successfully integrated with ethereal technology or worse, if she had somehow awakened dormant alien DNA, then everything Nexus Corporation understood about genetic manipulation would need to be rewritten. "Marcus Webb is still alive," Thanatos reported, gesturing toward the archaeological camp where Celestine's research partner sat under guard. "He may have useful intelligence." Victoria nodded. "Bring him to me, and prepare my private ship. If we can't capture the specimens here, we'll follow them wherever they've gone." Minutes later, Marcus Webb stood before her, his hands bound with energy restraints. Despite his precarious situation, defiance burned in his eyes. "I'm not telling you anything," he said before Victoria could speak. "Celestini saved you the trouble of hunting her down. She's beyond your reach now, is she?" Victoria circled him slowly, a predator evaluating prey. "Do you know what happens to energy beings when they materialize in normal space, Mr. Webb? They leave traces, quantum signatures that can be tracked across vast distances." Marcus's confidence faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Thanatos, show him the tracking display." A holographic projection materialized between them, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. Pulsing lines of energy traced paths between star systems, converging on a distant point near the galactic rim. "Your friend has made herself very easy to follow," Victoria continued. "But that's not why you're going to help us. You're going to help us because of what happened to your sister." The color drained from Marcus's face. "How do you know about Anna?" "Neural cascade failure, wasn't it? Same disease that killed Celestine's mother. Curious how it only affects certain bloodlines." Victoria's smile widened. "What if I told you that Anna Webb is still alive?" "That's impossible. She died 3 years ago on Titan Station." "She died, yes, but Nexus Corporation has been working on some fascinating applications of ethereal biotechnology, consciousness transfer, genetic restoration, even resurrection under the right circumstances. Victoria gestured, and another hologram appeared, a young woman floating in a suspension tank. Her features unmistakably similar to Marcus's. "Anna," he whispered, reaching toward the image before catching himself. "She's been in stasis while we perfected the integration process. Ethereal DNA is remarkably versatile, Mr. Webb. It can cure diseases, extend life, even grant abilities that border on the supernatural. All we need are proper test subjects to refine the technique." Marcus's hands trembled with rage. "You sick monster. You've been experimenting on my sister. We've been saving her," Victoria corrected. "But the process requires constant monitoring, constant adjustment. One small error in the containment protocols, and she'll be lost forever, permanently." The threat was clear. Marcus stared at the hologram of his sister, suspended between life and death, completely at Nexus Corporation's mercy. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. "Information about Celestine's transformation. Everything you observed, every detail about how she interacted with the alien technology, and more importantly, her emotional vulnerabilities. What would make her abandon caution and come to us willingly?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, weighing his sister's life against his loyalty to Celestine. Finally, he spoke. "She lost her parents in the colony wars. Her mother was all she had left. And then Helena died, revealing family secrets Celestine never suspected. She's been searching for belonging her entire life, for a place where she fits. This ethereal connection, it's the first time she's ever felt complete, interesting, and the alien consciousness she bonded with Zephyr." Marcus's voice was barely audible. 3,000 years of imprisonment for loving a human. He's desperate for connection, for freedom. Celestine represents everything he's lost and everything he hopes to regain. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. "Love makes people foolish, and desperate lovers make the most predictable choices of all." She turned to Thanatos. "Prepare the Hunter fleet and activate the Prometheus protocol." Dr. Thorne looked up sharply. "The Prometheus protocol, but the test subjects will be replaced," Victoria said coldly. "We're moving to full-scale implementation." Thanatos' scarred face showed the first hint of emotion. Victoria had ever seen from him something that might have been concern. The mortality rate for voluntary subjects is already 93%. Forced integration will be significantly higher. "Acceptable losses," Victoria replied, "especially if we can capture live ethereal specimens to study." Dr. Thorne, how many potential bloodline matches do we have in the corporate databases? Elena consulted her tablet, her expression troubled. "Approximately 15,000 individuals across 47 star systems show genetic markers consistent with ethereal heritage. Most don't even know they carry the genes. Contact our recruitment divisions. I want acquisition teams dispatched to every name on that list within 48 hours. Use whatever incentives necessary: job offers, medical emergencies, family crises. Bring them to our research facilities for routine genetic screening." Marcus struggled against his restraints. "You can't kidnap 15,000 people. The Galactic Council has no jurisdiction over internal corporate medical research," Victoria finished, "especially when the subjects volunteer for experimental treatments to save dying relatives." The scope of Victoria's plan began to dawn on Marcus. She wasn't just hunting Celestine and Zephyr, she was preparing to create an army of forced ethereal hybrids, regardless of the human cost. "You're talking about genocide," he whispered. "I'm talking about evolution," Victoria corrected. "Humanity's next step, guided by corporate wisdom rather than left to the chaos of natural selection. Those who survive the integration process will become the foundation of a new species, one that serves Nexus Corporation's interests." She turned to face the ruined excavation site, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "Celestine Voss thinks she's found love and freedom. What she's actually found is the key to remaking the galaxy in our image, and she's going to deliver it to us willingly." "How can you be so certain?" Victoria's smile was predatory. "Because we're going to give her a choice: surrender herself and her ethereal lover for study, or watch us systematically hunt down and experiment on every person who carries their bloodline, starting with the children, across the galaxy, in the boardrooms and laboratories of Nexus Corporation's vast corporate empire. The machinery of industrial genocide began to turn. Recruitment teams activated, transport ships launched and holding, facilities prepared to receive the first wave of unwilling test subjects. Dr. Thorne watched the preparations with growing horror. "There has to be another way," she said quietly. "We could try to establish peaceful contact, negotiate some kind of agreement." "Negotiations are for equals," Victoria replied. "Ethereals are a resource to be harvested, nothing more. Their genetic code will advance human development by centuries, but only if we control how it's used." As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the corporate facility. Thanatos activated his communication implant, listening to reports from the orbital monitoring stations. Long-range sensors detect massive energy buildup in the Andromeda's sector, he reported. Multiple quantum signatures consistent with ethereal technology. Victoria's pulse quickened. "How many? Unknown. The readings are off our measurement scales." For the first time since the project began, Victoria felt a flicker of uncertainty. If Celestini and Zephyr had somehow awakened other ethereal consciousnesses, if there were more of them than Nexus Corporation had anticipated, she pushed the doubt aside. Fear was weakness, and weakness had no place in corporate leadership. "Activate all hunter fleets," she ordered. "I want every ship equipped with quantum dampening fields and consciousness disruption weapons, if they're..." Darius Voss was halfway through rebuilding a hyperdrive motivator when the emergency beacon from his sister's archaeological team reached him. The message was brief, encrypted, and terrifying. "Celestini missing. Nexus Corporation involved. Trust no one." He set down his plasma welder with hands that trembled despite his engineer's steady nerves. The message had come through Marcus Webb's personal encryption, which meant it was genuine. But if Nexus Corporation was involved, then Celestini was in more danger than she could possibly understand. The repair bay of the freight hauler Wandering Star suddenly felt claustrophobic. Darius had chosen this life specifically to stay off corporate radar, working freelance among the Outer Rim traders, fixing ships for crews who asked no questions and kept no official records. It was a good life for someone who valued independence over security. But independence meant nothing if his sister was in danger. "Captain Reynolds," he called out, wiping grease from his hands. "I need to take emergency leave." "Captain Nora." Reynolds emerged from the cargo hold, her weathered face creased with concern. She'd been running freight between the outer colonies for 30 years, and she knew trouble when she saw it. "Family emergency?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. From Darius's expression, "My sister. She's an archaeologist, and she's gotten herself into something bad." "Corporate bad," Reynolds nodded grimly. The Outer Rim was full of people who'd had unfortunate encounters with corporate interests. "Take the Stellar Drifter," she said, referring to the small courier ship docked in their cargo bay. "She's fast, stealthy, and her registration is clean. Whatever your sister's gotten into, you'll need every advantage you can get." Within hours, Darius was racing through hyperspace toward Kepler-4 his mind churning with possibilities. Celestini had always been careful, methodical in her research. For her to disappear like this meant she'd stumbled onto something extraordinary and extraordinarily dangerous. The journey gave him time to research Nexus Corporation's recent activities, and what he found made his blood run cold. Shell companies, acquiring genetic research facilities across the galaxy, mysterious recruitment drives targeting specific demographic profiles, and most disturbing of all, reports of people with rare genetic markers simply vanishing from their homes and workplaces. When he arrived at Kepler-4, the archaeological site was crawling with corporate security. Darius kept the Stellar Drifter hidden in the asteroid belt and used a maintenance pod to reach the planet's surface undetected. What he found there defied belief. The entire excavation site had been transformed into a militarized research facility. Prefabricated buildings surrounded the ruins, connected by fortified walkways and defensive barriers. But most shocking of all was what remained of the alien structure itself. It had been completely dismantled, every piece of obsidian stone cataloged and shipped away for analysis. hidden in the sparse vegetation beyond the perimeter. Darius watched through binoculars as corporate scientists worked frantically around a massive crater where the ruins had once stood. At the center of their activities was a woman in an expensive suit whose very presence seemed to command absolute obedience from everyone around her. Victoria Blackthorne, even from a distance. Darius could sense the predatory intelligence that had made her one of the most feared executives in corporate space. Looking for someone? Darius spun around to find a woman pointing a stunner at his chest. She was tall and athletic, with short auburn hair and the kind of scars that spoke of serious military experience. But what caught his attention were her eyes, intelligent, alert, and filled with barely contained fury. "Easy," she said, noting his defensive posture. "I'm not with them." Name's Jenna Cross, former Nexus Corporation security. Emphasis on former. "What happened? I discovered what they're really doing here, and my conscience kicked in." Jenna gestured toward the corporate facility. "They've got holding cells down there filled with people who share certain genetic markers. Children, elderly, doesn't matter. If you've got ethereal DNA, you're a test subject." Darius felt sick. "My sister Celestini Voss. She was working the site." Jenna's expression softened slightly. "The archaeologist. She escaped 3 days ago, along with something the corporation desperately wants back. But they've been using her research partner as leverage ever since. Marcus? He's being held in the detention facility. They've got his sister in some kind of medical stasis, using her as insurance for his cooperation. Poor bastards, Ben. Feeding them intelligence about your sister's psychological profile." The pieces began falling into place for Darius. They're hunting her. More than that, they're using her to draw out others like her. Every time she and her companion manifest their abilities, it creates quantum signatures that can be tracked. Nexus is following those signatures to identify potential subjects for their experimentation program. Darius studied the corporate facility, his engineer's mind automatically calculating approaches and vulnerabilities. "We need to get Marcus out of there. We need to do more than that." Jenna activated a portable holographic display, showing surveillance footage from across the galaxy. "This is what's happening on 17 different worlds. Right now, the images were horrifying. Corporate acquisition, teams conducting mass medical screenings in refugee camps, families being separated for genetic counseling that they never returned from, research facilities where human subjects were being forcibly integrated with alien DNA, most dying in agony while a few emerged transformed into something neither human nor ethereal. This is genocide," Darius whispered. "It's business," Jenna corrected bitterly. "Victoria Blackthorne has convinced the board that forced evolution is humanity's only path to galactic dominance. She's using your sister's love story as justification for industrial-scale atrocity." One particular image caught Darius's attention: a young boy, no more than 10 years old, floating in a suspension tank while alien genetic code rewrote his DNA. The child's face was twisted in silent agony, and electrodes monitored his brain activity as the transformation slowly killed him. "That could be anyone's child," Darius said, his voice rough with emotion. "My future children. If I'm ever blessed to have them, which is why we're going to stop this," Jenna replied. "But not just by rescuing Marcus. We're going to bring down the entire program." "How?" Jenna smiled grimly. "By giving Nexus Corporation exactly what they think they want." Over the next several hours, Jenna outlined her plan. As a former security chief, she still had access codes to certain corporate systems. More importantly, she knew about Project Prometheus, Victoria's plan to create an army of forced ethereal hybrids. "The program has one critical vulnerability," she explained. "All the research data is stored in a central quantum computer aboard Blackthorne's personal flagship, the Corporate Dominion. Destroy that data, and the entire project collapses." "And how exactly do we reach a flagship surrounded by an entire corporate fleet?" "We don't. We make them come to us." Jenna activated another display, showing energy readings from the past 72 hours. "Your sister and her companion have been manifesting incredible power levels. Each time they appear, they leave quantum traces that the corporate sensors can detect." Darius began to understand. "We faked their signature. Better than that, We amplify it. Create a quantum resonance so powerful that Victoria will have no choice but to investigate. Personally, when she does, we'll be waiting. The plan was dangerous, bordering on suicidal. But Dryas couldn't think of a better option. As they prepared to infiltrate the corporate facility, Jenna shared one final piece of intelligence. "There's something else you need to know about your family's genetics," she said quietly. "The ethereal DNA isn't just randomly distributed. It follows specific bloodlines. And those bloodlines all trace back to a single source, the original human ethereal hybrid children. From 3,000 years ago. You're saying we're all related. I'm saying you're all family. Every person Nexus Corporation is hunting, every child they're experimenting on, every life they're destroying, they're all your distant cousins. Descendants of the same forbidden love that created your sister's connection to Zephyr." The weight of that revelation settled on Dryas like a physical blow. This wasn't just about saving Celestini anymore. It was about protecting an entire hidden lineage of humanity, people who carried within their genes the legacy of a love so powerful it had transcended species barriers. "Then we end this," he said quietly. "All of it." As night fell over Kepler-4 for to be, Dryas and Jenna began their infiltration of the corporate facility. Neither of them knew that halfway across the galaxy, Celestini and Zephyr had sensed the approaching danger to their extended family. Even now, they were racing toward a confrontation that would determine not just their own fate, but the future of human ethereal relations for generations to come. But first, they had to survive Victoria Blackthorn's trap. In her private office, aboard the corporate Dominion, Victoria studied the latest quantum readings with growing satisfaction. The energy signatures were getting stronger, more frequent. Whatever abilities Celestini Voss had awakened were growing exponentially, and each manifestation brought Victoria closer to her prize. "Ma'am," her communication officer reported, "we're detecting massive quantum buildup.